All right, this is the third session for ORMAP training, and this is Tuesday, February 20th at 8:04 a.m. Pacific time. As we always do, let's start with some observations and some homework. Who wants to go and be the first?
I'll go.
All right.
Number one, don't use Slacker
Yeah,
for anything important.
yeah, it's yeah, overall. Again, my philosophy has always been that don't apply something to all your data when it may not be applicable to all your data. I'm always very leery of any sort of batch processing, unless you know exactly what's going to happen to it. So yeah, that's a great one. It's a good one to remember also. Yeah. Yet another one?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You were demonstrating how you can analyze mismatched dimensions.
Yes. Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that there because there's these quality control functions built into the parcel fabric that it's more than just dimensions. It's other things like would you have short segments that maybe they shouldn't be there and things like that. And yeah, there are built-in quality control in the fabric that allow you to do the sort of analysis that you can find once you sort of start storing your data in the correct format. Yeah, those are both very good. Thank you. Who's next?
I was really interested in the Kogo. I thought it was really neat how you could use different units. And I think in your example, you used chains and it automatically adjusted for that.
Yeah.
So one chain being 66 feet. I thought that was pretty slick. I also liked the closure tab, which allow you to see the original values, the adjusted values, and the residual values on angles. I thought that was very helpful to kind of see which of those methods might work best in your situation.
Yeah, the only thing that's not that I personally wish that Esri would do is that on the closure tab, there is no way to go and capture that information. There's no way to go and store it and capture it. So that what we've always told our clients, to do, just go ahead and take a screenshot, store it as a file, as just a screenshot out there and use that. But I suspect sometime in the future, Esri may go and say, okay, you can go ahead and and push that out. Yeah, there's some things that we'll talk about maybe tomorrow about some of the new functions they're looking at building in here, doing, for example, what they call before and after map, where you can go and say, well, this is what the parcel looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. And then also doing a parcel specific map, which allows you to go and isolate a single parcel and identify and print out all the courses associated with that and closure information and some others. I think Esri's going to build the closure information so you could also store that there, but that's pure speculation on my part. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those are good. I'm glad you picked up on those. Who's next? Uh, okay, I'm going to start calling Summer.
Well, I'm struggling with this one, so I apologize. I'm trying to go through my notes and look. There's a lot we discussed last week, but I can't yet pick out two things. Unfortunately, I know I learned a lot. It was just so, man, I'm not sure. Um,
I'll let you pass here.
let me come back to you.
Yeah. All right. Gabe, you want to give us something now? Two.
Well, Frank, I honestly don't have anything.
Oh, it is after a couple days away. I understand. So
Yep.
hopefully you're at least testing some of this and looking at it and doing that. So
Yeah, we talked at a meeting with Dean on, it must have been Thursday, and so we talked about a couple of things. So it's a lot of information for us. It's vastly different than what we've done. I was having a hard time understanding the difference between fabric and our actual production of what we're doing, and so that piece, that connection, isn't there for me yet. So
yeah, it's
you know, the Kogo piece is huge for us, like was mentioned earlier. That's a big part of what we do is Kogo. So that I need more work with that, I guess you would say.
yeah.
But there's so many, you know, and I don't quite understand the clip piece and the I think the align was the other one. It was just, I'm not quite understanding how it all fits. I understand, you know, what you've shown us, but I'm not understanding how it's going to work with our workflow. So that's kind of like a gray area for me that I'm not wrapping my head around completely.
That doesn't necessarily mean there's any deficiency on your part. It mostly means that I haven't described it well enough for you to be able to go and make that leap to figure out what that is. So
Well,
help me with this. So you're right now, it's my understanding you are a cartographer, correct?
yes.
You produce maps. So when you get a new parcel in, you get a parcel in and you map it out, right? How do you go and show that what used to be one parcel is now two parcels?
Well, we don't really have a historical in that sense. We use historical lines, which are just dashed lines. If that's
Okay.
what you're asking me.
But that's a good indication. You use dashed historic lines instead, so that um let me start with this. Do you create separate polygons for each parcel that's in there, or is it mostly you're creating a representation using lines and annotation or pieces of
Yes, we certainly use polygons, and everything's based from polygons.
okay.
So yeah, we do that piece. It's just that the most of what we do is we try to fit it in with the existing, and it looks like fabric. You can align things differently, so it's more accurate for the newer things that are put in, but I'm not sure yet.
So that's maybe a piece that I haven't described as well as I should have. The parcel fabric allows you to do either, all right? So that you can fit your new parcel into your existing data using that same tool, that align parcels tool. The difference is, and let's go through here just so that let's go and create a new record here. And let's work through that. So I go in here, I'm now going to go and I'm going to create a polygon. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to create a polygon here. And this polygon is going to be there. And then I'm going to go and tell it to go and build it, which means it creates the lines and everything in there. All right. And then I'm going to use the align parcels. Now, this align parcels tool really is nothing more than a way to ensure that it fits one way or the other. And the thing that's going to be adjusted is what's selected. And in most cases, well, I can't say that because that's the reason why there's such sort of some uncertainty. There's a way that you look at your data. You can either say this new parcel, because it's newer information, is more accurate than what I have, in which case you adjust the old data to fit the new. Or you can say, my old data is good and I just want to adjust my new parcel to fit into that old data. And this align parcel tool allows you to do either one. And we've been showing one way, and I'm unfortunately I haven't shown the other way. But the secret to it is that whatever we have selected, And in this case, we have this one new parcel that I just created. That's what's selected. That's going to get adjusted. If in fact we wanted to do it the other way, we could, there's a button here that says toggle it. When we say toggle it, it actually selects everything that is touching that parcel. And that's what's going to get adjusted. So the Align Parcels tool allows you to go and figure out, what do I want to adjust to fit into this? Do I want to adjust the new, or do I want to adjust the old? And it's whatever is selected, that's what's going to get adjusted.
So when
That's
it when it adjusts, and it says the ones that are touching, for instance, in this case, does it adjust all the lines and all the polygons like instantaneously? But then the
Yep.
ones that are touching the touching ones, they get left alone because
They don't get moved. So here's one of the interesting things about this is that when it goes and makes an adjustment, when it goes and adjusts things, what it actually does is it takes the points and moves the points. And because let's clear out of this, let's get off of this. Let's talk a little bit more about how this all works. So if I go in here and select, make sure. Yeah, let's have this discussion. Inside of ArcGIS Pro, there's 3 different ways that you can see that things move. Right now, and it depends upon what topology we have available or what we have selected. If I go in here and select that one point, all right, that's all I want to do is select that point. If I take that point and I click move, I then can go and move, and it will go, and I know it's yellow, so you can't see it, but the point is now over here. If I have no topology set up, it only goes and moves the thing that I have selected. All right. Only the thing I have selected will get moved. So if I were to go and click here, yeah, it moved the one point over to here, and that's it. That's no topology. If I go back and say, well, let's use map topology. Map topology is interesting because it looks and analyzes everything that's being displayed at this moment. Now, when I go and I say move this, you'll note that as it moves, there's rubber banding. There's this indication that something's going to be rubber banded here and here and here. And what it goes and moves and what it adjusts is not just the point that I have selected, but everything that is visibly connected to that point. This is called map topology. Map topology can be set and is active, and it will go and move anything that is connected to that point or anything that's connected to my selection. If I were to have selected that line with map topology on here now, and I move this, you can see as I move it, it goes and analyzes what's being displayed. And if it's connected, it is going to be moved accordingly. So it's not going to create gaps or overlaps. It's going to automatically do that. So let's go here and here. The third way of doing this, and the third type of topology, is one in which you have rule-based topology, or what's commonly called the geodatabase topology. That one is, it doesn't matter if it's being displayed or not displayed. If anything is connected in your data set to that thing that you have selected, it will get impacted. It will get moved. So that if I have all these layers turned off, but I select a point that is connected to other things, everything that I move, and when I move that one selected thing, everything that's connected, whether it's being displayed or not, will get impacted. So those are the 3 settings that you deal with when you're dealing with ArcGIS Pro. It just so happens that when we do the align parcels inside of here, it uses that setting. So if I have selected the polygon, as I move that polygon, it moves all the lines connected with it, all the points is connected to it, everything is connected to it. So it's just sort of, it's just using ArcGIS Pro's inherent way to analyze what's connected to what as far as when it makes that adjustments. All right,
Okay.
good. That's
One of the issues I had when I'm practicing with the Align tool over the last year is I found the issue is all the settings have to be right. All the check boxes, all the, you have to know what you're doing with the check boxes and have practiced it enough to know what they all mean, because the description on them isn't necessarily real good. So sometimes it's a little ambiguous, and you have to look it up and see what does that really mean. And,
that's exactly right. These tools, like any tools, you want to know all the options with them. You want to really learn how to use the tools and become not just, mild users of them, but become really good at what you're doing with these tools. There's a lot of complexity built in. Interesting, you mentioned about the documentation on there. I actually this weekend I was at a personal event with some people, and I was talking to programmers, and we were talking about technical writers, those people that write the help files and the documentation. Universally, we all condemn them. It's like these are horrible, and a lot of it is because the programmers write the code. They know how it works. They describe it to the tech writers. The tech writers, what they think they heard, that's what they put in there. And the end user wants to know not just what the tech writer wrote, but what the programmer knows about it and all the nuances of what changes, what little options, what those impacts have upon the functionality of that tool. That's what the end user wants. We never get it. We never get it. All the best we can do is, like you've done, Scott, experiment. Do it this way, see if it works. If it doesn't work, do something else, see if what that does. It's the way I describe it to my people, and when I'm talking to people, is like break things, make mistakes along the way, because that's the only way that you can see how it works and how it doesn't work. And it's only through that experience that you really begin to understand the software. When I'm talking to people about it, they're like, well, often they'll go and they'll ask me, well, Frank, where did you find all this information? Where'd you learn it? And I have to go and tell them 50 years of using ArcGIS software and having a brain like an elephant. I never forget a mistake that I make. I always remember it. And I make almost every mistake you can make. I had a manager at one time that said, Frank, you're the only person I know who can break a steel ball bearing. It's like, I break things. I love to break things because that helps me gain a rich understanding of what's really going on here. So break things all the time. All right, Gabe, that was really meaningful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me. And like I said, I don't see it as your issue. It's my issue. I haven't described that well enough is what it was to help you understand it. So thank you. So
Thank you.
anyway, the clip and everything, it really is a way that the software allows you to go and signify that there's a change in the parcel configuration. And here's what blows my mind. And here's why often when I talk about using the software, I try to describe to you one or two ways that I think is best. There's probably 8, 9 different ways to do one thing. It's amazing how many different ways you can do this. I actually have, about a year or so ago, I did a YouTube video, which I took one of my workshops and said, how many different ways can you split a parcel? And I think I found at least 10 ways you could split a parcel. So things like, well, going and clipping things. let's look at it. Let's do this. So if I go and I'll do this without the parcel fabric, just so we can look at it. All right. So I won't have an active record here, and I'll go and I'll create a tax parcel. All right, there's a tax parcel. Now if I look, I've got, it sits on top of another one. All right, there's another parcel on top of that. So here's the new one that sits on top. How do I ensure that this parcel here now reflects its overall area without that in it? Okay, one way I can do it is I can go and do that clip, right? I can do the clip command on here, and the clip command, and again, this is not parcel specific. This is not parcel fabric specific. This is a command that works inside of ArcGIS Pro. It works everywhere. The clip command, I can say, okay, discard the area that is being intersected. Discard that area. When I clip, there it is. Now I have now this parcel, and I have this parcel. That's one way to do it. Let's undo that. Another way that we can do this is I can take this parcel and I can reshape it. I can configure it. I could do a replace the geometry on it. So I can draw the new geometry of that. Or I could go and split that. All right. And when I go and split this, I can split this parcel. Let's do it interactively. I can take and say, let's split this parcel and split this out of this parcel here. All right. I did the same thing. I took this parcel and I took this parcel. All right. I split it. Now the split, it just leaves two of them here because it doesn't discard what I cut out. I just cut that thing in half. Now, I'm illustrating with a polygon. It could be lines, and I could just say, I want to split this out. So that has the same results of flipping. So that's another way of doing it. There's so many different ways of doing these things, just taking and cutting and moving. It's just standard geography as far as taking these geometries and modifying and then fitting them on top of one another. So what, go ahead.
That kind of illustrates one of the issues I had with, because one of the options was to discard the area. And you're looking at that and you go, well, what does that mean? Do I discard? Does it go away? What would have been nicer if they said discard the area from the parent parcel?
Yeah.
You know.
So if I go to clip is an amazing tool. Clip. The first one basically is discard. And basically what it means is just take and anything that it's on top of, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Okay, that's discard. Preserve is the same as that split, in which I can go and preserve it. It will go and preserve the area that intersects. Again, remember my short little discussion about the tech writers? They really don't know what this is. They're just saying what the programmer said it was. Oh, it's going to preserve the area that it intersects. What the hell does that mean? I don't know. I don't know. Contains, it deletes all the features outside the clip area. This is a new one. This is one that's sort of, this is super powerful, but it's super scary. If you try this, make sure you don't save this. Make sure you don't have autosave because it's going to go and take things out. If I were to go and do this right now, everything outside my selected feature would be deleted. Everything. Everything. So when would you use this thing? When would you use this thing? Well, if I'm putting together a data set and I want to go and have the municipality, and I only want to show what's in the municipality, maybe I would go and draw polygon of the municipality and say, just eliminate everything outside of my area. That's what that thing does. But it's not a contain. It really doesn't say retain the areas inside. It says contain, delete everything outside the clip area. Experiment, test this before you actually use some of these tools. That one. This is actually the, I'm sorry, I
And make
said
sure-
preserve before. This is
And
the
make
other
sure
one.
your undo buffer is big enough.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I,
And make
I
sure that
speak
you
from
do,
experience.
yeah, make sure you do not have autosave turned on, and make sure your buffer is large enough that it can retain that. So again, and this is not parcel fabric specific. This is just the tools and the way they work. They're putting so many options in here. This one right here, this one. Clip all editable features. Super powerful if you know what you're doing. If you don't, that's super dangerous. By default, I tend to keep it on because I always track over here what I have turned on and know what I'm looking at and stuff. In this case, it only will clip, or it will clip everything that is turned on, is visible, and is editable. Boom. It will automatically clip through everything. However, I decide to retain what I decide to retain. It will clip everything. And this also is often a lot of our clients, they'll have public land survey system information turned on in the background, and they'll have subdivision turned on and stuff, and they'll go to clip something and that's checked. And it's like, oh, you just drilled a hole through everything in your data. Make sure you know what each of these options is going to do. It's very important. So if I uncheck that, by the way, it automatically says I have to go and select my target. What am I going to select? What am I going to clip out of? And my intersect. But by default, this is very powerful. Know what the tools do. So thank you, Scott. It's a good reminder. This is not just for parcel fabric. This is for anything that you're doing with the GIS data. These tools really, they are very powerful in what you're doing. Let's continue. All right. Jeffrey, do you want to give us a couple things you might have picked up to this point?
Last Friday, I was experimenting, watching your video, and I was making a subdivision, and I did copy lines to lots. Everything was working smoothly, and then I just simply wanted to try to split one of those lots in half, and for some reason it wouldn't let me. Like you see in the bottom right corner where it says clip, it was grayed out like that. This was a split tool, not the clip tool. I don't know what I did wrong, but it wasn't liking it, and I had everything selected, and so
Yeah. So if we could trace what you did, it would be helpful.
I know I don't have the elephant memory.
That's all right. That's all right. Often so let's talk about that copy lines too. It's a really, really nice tool. Again, the way you use it, create a record, always create records. Select your parcel. All right. Let's go and select a parcel here, and then copy lines 2. And again, this is the parcel record workflow, copy lines 2. What it does is this allows us to take an existing geometry and use this to either split something, build something else. It allows us to go in and do a lot of things, but it's always with existing geometry. So we'll take copy lines 2, and we can tell we're going to put it onto a lot layer. So just right there, one of those things that it just did is it took my selected parcel, took the adjacent lines, and brought those lines and copied and pasted them into the lot layer, the lot line layer. Took the polygon made it a seed so that if I look here, I have got all of these new lot lines that weren't there before, and I've got a seed that I haven't selected yet. If I had told it to go to the exact same layer that that thing that I had selected came from, it would have taken the polygon and marked it historic. Because the anticipation is that, oh, you're going to split something on this layer. Since I sent it to another layer, it says, oh, you're creating something else. So I'm not going to mark that old one historic. Logically, I'm going to keep it as it is. Here's where people often, and I'm, again, I don't always describe this as well as I should. If I have another subdivision that I built the subdivision, I did copy lines 2, built the subdivision. Then I went and took that same subdivision with the same record and I said, okay, copy lines to lots. What will happen is if I have that subdivision layer still turned on, I will be seeing my lot lines and my subdivision lines there. And often what happens is when you go to select that line, you'll select both of them. Let's do this. Let's discard this. All right, let's discard everything up to this point. Let's create a new record. We're going to build a sub. All right. We're going to take this parcel. We're going to do a copy lines to our subdivision layers. Going to make it the exterior, so let's build that as a sub. All right, that's our sub. We have the sub is selected at the moment. Now let's copy our lines and say we're going to go and split this into lot lines and lot layers. When we go and do that, it copied all the adjacent lines and copy and pasted them into the lot layer over here. But if I look, right, my subs are still turned on. So that when, and even though it's showing everything that's only part of this record, because my subdivision information was part of this record, it's now clearly showing. So when I do a selection, I'm selecting that lot line and this subdivision line and this subdivision polygon. From a workflow standpoint, if you're using this workflow and copy lines 2, turn off the layer that you're not working on at the moment. Turn off the subdivision layer if you're building lots, because you've already captured the lines from that subdivision polygon and you don't need them anymore. Now I can go and build my lots. So Jeff, I thought one of the first things you were going to go and describe was you built it that way, followed that same workflow, and then you were intersecting subdivision lines or whatever. You were building the subdivision lines. And that may have been what you did. You may have actually selected the subdivision line and split that, and that may have given you things that you didn't think you were going to have in there. So now let's go and put some lines in here. All right, I've only got my lot lines turned on. Let's go ahead and put a line here to here. Let's make this a simple thing here. All right. So we do our division. Note, we don't have to split this line. We can if you want to. We don't have to split this line. They just have to intersect. And I can say create my seeds. There's my 2 lots, and I can build them out. When I say build, it turns everything else back on. So I can see all the layers that I have turned on, including subdivision layer. So it builds that way. Not quite sure, Jeffrey, what you did, but you just want to recognize that there's a certain workflow as you're going through and understand what the function does. And when you have, select again. when I select that one lot, I select this lot, and I do a copy lines to, it's going to copy it again, depending upon how I set this up. If it copies it to a different layer, it's going to keep the parent, what we call the parent, the same. If I copy it to the same layer, it's going to mark the one that I had selected as historic. And then the other options inside of here is show only active records. When by default this is on, which automatically means that it goes and invokes show only active record and everything else disappears except what is part of that record right now. And then finally, preserve attributes is when it has a seed, is it going to be the attributes that get carried over, or is it going to be something different? All right, lots of discussion there. Thank you. Did you have another one, Jeffrey? Said it.
No, not really. I guess just a statement to where is how this parcel fabric is mostly about record keeping as well as much as it is making your lines, making a map.
Yeah.
It's just a statement, but I'm learning.
It is, that is very, very important. It's a good observation that it's really, I'm going to be honest, it's not about making a map. It's about record keeping. It's about, if you remember the first day, I made a comment that what the parcel fabric does is it changes you from cartographers into curators of digital land records. It's about keeping track of where this information came from, what you actually input, what impact it has, how it changed your data, that sort of thing is what the parcel fabric does. So yeah, it's not always about creating a map. It's about changing the data. Thanks.
It's a different way of thinking, but once you understand that, it makes going forward easier. Just knowing that, like you said, you're being a curator, so record keeping is sort of paramount to what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. And we got joined by, I think, about everybody now. So those of you that just joined, Erica, give me some of your homework. What did you learn so far in doing this?
Good morning, Frank.
Good morning.
I learned that I really need to play with ground to grid. And I'm excited to, I haven't had a chance yet, but I'm really excited to use some of those keyboard shortcuts you showed us, like for the delta angle and the chord. I'm super excited about those. So yeah, I have my little sticky note for like my directions, but I'm excited. I didn't know about those. So super
Yeah.
excited. And I am looking forward to actually being in production in Pro. I think it is really cool. It looks good. So
Yeah, there's a lot of things on here, and part of our discussion before some of you came on was about the reality is to really use Pro, whether it's in the parcel fabric or not, to use Pro well, you really have to spend some time to learn what the tools do, what all the options are the tools are, because on a very high level, what Esri did between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap used to have a lot of tiny little tools that were specific to one thing. ArcGIS Pro has fewer tools, but they have a lot more options. And those options really change the function of the tool. They change slightly how it works. And you need to understand what those options do. Yeah, it's a good one. Thank you. Let me see you. Did we miss anything? Dean, thank you for being here. You're hiding right now, but thank you for being here on here. Do you have anything to add?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Sorry to be a little late. That's my Tuesday. I also looked at it your comment about we're land records and we're map making, I go back to my old forestry inventory days and what we used to do with mapping there. And in that particular case, I look at that by maintaining the map, we're maintaining the land record. And so as cartographers, the land record is there as a byproduct. Because if you do your map right, then the records are all going to be there. And it's in my old days is when you did inventory, if you did inventory right, then the databases all got updated. And we used to maintain our inventory on maps. So I look at it from the flip side, being that I've been supporting cartographers and not land records people for so long. But it's just a different way of looking at it. But if you do it right, the land records are all right there for you. And it should make things easier. And it took us a little while at Polk County, but yeah, it's coming along pretty well. I think the other thing is Gabe and Jeff, and I don't know if they talked about this, is we got into a discussion after the class in that in this design, we have subdivision, we have lots, and we have tax lots. And is that the fabric? Well, the fabric is those feature classes and the relationship classes tied to the record. We don't need all three. If some counties don't want to maintain subdivisions and lots, they don't have to. They miss some of the richness associated with what a subdivision and a lot is, but having a single feature class like tax lots be part of the fabric, it's just the tax lot and the record. It's the same sort of thing. And so you can, and that's what's so cool about it, is you can build these complex environments, but you can also keep it less. And the relationship between the feature classes that are in the fabric and the record, they're all the same, and they're just feature classes. So that was kind of a discussion we had, is do I need to do everything? Subdivisions, lots, tax lots to be in the fabric? No, that's a business decision that counties have to make, is do they want to manage those three feature classes? And we've set it up because back in 2006, we decided as a state that counties have the option to do those three things, and we carried them on. Whether counties do or not, it's really up to them. So just comments from just the last few days.
Yeah, and that's important. And we all have our own opinion as far as whether it's worth it to put the subdivisions and the lots inside this. And it's how much information do you give somebody while they're working on this? And it's not like you're making a whole bunch of changes with subdivisions and lots, because they're really, realistically, the only time you map them is when you get a new one. All right. Other than that, those layers are very, very static. They don't change at all. Same way if you decide to put the public land survey system, the townships, the sections, all the quarter sections and stuff. They're just reference layers that are used to help you decide how to map something. When you have a description that reads the east 50 feet of lot 7 inside of a subdivision, how do you determine where that is? You have to have something to reference, and that's what these other layers are for. Here's and here. Whether you include them in the fabric or just have them external, that's up to you. That's an organizational decision on here. And how rich do you want that data set to be? That's all it is. It is, that seems foreign also, but it's interesting to observe the different organizations and how they handle that.
Yeah, I mean, we're at Polk County, we're just now, as part of our production environment, have brought in the subdivisions and the lots into feature classes we're managing. Seems to be going well. And have also then used that as a way to do some of our labeling. And we use subdivision and lot names, which our assessment and taxation system have built in, because that's part of the property description for those.
Right.
entire pieces. And by managing it that way, we're able to feed those other systems more easily. Again, that was a huge review of our work process. Not a big change in once you're actually editing, but just how are we going to do the business function? And I think, you know, we've got the opportunity within the ORMAP counties that we can take what we have in ArcMap, we can all make it go that way in ORMAP, whether we want just tax lots or we want more or whatever. The question is it's a great time now to review the business process and say, what do you want to do? You know, we hadn't changed our business process at Polk in 20 years. And so it's been kind of exciting. And it took a lot longer. Everybody goes, well, it took you 2 years to do your conversion. Yeah, it did, because we had to walk through all of those impacts. And those are not simple things to test and to make sure happen. Now, should we done our conversion first and then gone? I don't know. I sometimes it's hard to design with a new system when you don't know what the new system can do. So bringing everything across, and maybe we should have done a phase 2. That's what Clackamas County's doing. They brought everything into Pro, and now they're looking at it again. Yeah, there's some real advantages to that. So different things to think about as we do conversions.
Just to give you some insight, in Florida, all right, in Florida, the Department of Revenue requires that you maintain the subdivision layer and you provide the dimensions that are provided on the original subdivision layer, and that you maintain the lot layer and the dimensions that are shown on the lots on that subdivision, and that you maintain a block layer for the block groups and the dimensions, and that you maintain the tax layer, the tax parcel layer, tax lot layer, and you maintain the dimensions that are shown on the deeds for those. And they do it so that when they get their annual submittals, they can look through and see how well is this actually mapped? How well does it match what is on the official documents on there? So they use that as for their quality control, whether or not they go and certify the rolls on it. So they're a little bit tougher. South Carolina is more like this. Oh, you have the tax parcel. That's all you really need. That's because we don't. Yeah.
And tomorrow, when we talk about tools, I have a new tool that is making that state data standard for the tax code, the map index, and the tax lot layers. And we'll just hit that really briefly. I just finished up testing it with Wasco yesterday.
Good. All right. So let's continue. I think the only one we didn't talk to was Andrew. But Andrew, do you have anything real quickly? No. All right. So let's keep going then. So Kogo type attribute. Excuse me if I forgot this. Did we talk about Kogo type and what impact this actually has on here? Here with entered from geometry and computed. Yes,
we did.
We did. Thank you. Okay. So we really don't have to talk about that anymore. Let's look a little bit more about some of these tools. The merge tool. All right, the merge tool, as with almost all of these tools, it's a very simple tool, but it does a lot of different things with it. So if we look, first of all, before we actually get into Pro again, on the merge tool, there's actually 2 different options here. There's merge it into an existing one or merge it into a new feature. That's important. If you merge it into an existing one, if you're in the fabric, it goes and marks the existing things that you've selected historic. If you're merging it into something new, it doesn't necessarily make it historic. So just be aware of that. So when I go in here, again, create a record, always create a record. Then I go and select 2 parcels here and here. I then go and do a merge on here. Again, it looks fairly simple, but it does a couple different things. I can merge it into a new feature. All right. And I can say, let's keep this feature here and keep the attributes from that feature. And I can tell it to use a template or not use a template. All right. So let's start from scratch. Let's go down all of these options. Existing feature means it's going to take whatever I have and put it together and combine them into a single feature. All right. Doesn't necessarily mean, well, with the parcel fabric, this always means historic. So I put it into an existing feature here. It's going to merge it into here. It's going to use this. It's going to use this attribution and then automatically update anything like anything else that's fired off to get automatically updated. That's an existing feature. Non-parcel fabric, it just means it's going to put them together. That's all. In a new feature, it means it's going to create something new. With the parcel fabric and an active record, it will take the existing and make it historic. Keep originals is whether or not you want that to be historic. If you want it to make the existing features that you've selected historic, check this, keep original features, mean keep them, but mark them historic. That's what that option is. This template has to do with where do you want these things merged into? The same layer? A different layer? Where do you want them merged? So if I use a template with the same layer, it's going to null out all the attribution and say, okay, we're giving it new attribution. If, however, I want to go and capture the attribution in one of these, all right, I would uncheck that template and say, use this attribution for this new parcel. Again, it's a lot of complexity built in here. It looks like it's really simple, but there's a lot of complexity. Whether or not you want historic, whether or not you want to use existing attribution. And to build on what Scott said earlier, why don't they just say it that way? They don't. This is, again, part of their nomenclature. The technical writers don't really understand how it's going to be used, so they try to explain it as the programmers have explained it to them. So if I want this to have existing attribution, I can tell it that attribution, merge it together. Boom, it said merged. If I go and turn on historic, I can see there's a historic. It marked the parcels historic, and it marked the one line that was used by both of those historic. If I go back now and say, okay, now let's take these two and go to a new parcel, but this time I want this to be a subdivision. Again, it gives me my new attribution for my subdivisions. And when I merge this together, it becomes a subdivision parcel. My existing tax parcels don't get impacted at all. So the merge tool, kind of like the copy lines too, has options in there that allows you to figure out, allows you to determine what the result is. Is it going to be something new? Is it going to be used for a combination or a merging on here or not? The merge tool, there's simplicity, but there's complexity built into it. That's one of the one that seems to be the easiest to describe is there's the things you can do with it. The clip tool, again, this is an earlier screenshot. It doesn't have the contains option in there, but it allows you to go and clip and select what's going to get clipped and what it's going to go through. Here's something that's very important. The clip tool only works with polygons. You can't select lines. You have to have a polygon for it to clip through that polygon. All right. So if you go in here and you try to clip to select all the lines for it, it doesn't work. It needs a polygon to be clipped. And then you have the option of A, what's it going to do with the area inside that polygon? Is it going to discard it? Is it going to preserve it? Is it going to do this contained, or is it just going to split it? And are you going to have to select what it's going to clip, or is it going to clip everything that's being displayed for you? That's the options here. Again, here's what I'm going to clip. And then what am I going to clip it out of? And I can go and tell it, clip it out of all those things on here. The interesting thing about clip is with the clip function, if you actually tell it to display certain components on here, when you go and say, clip this, all right, look here, clip this, and you say, well, tell me what it's going to clip. You can tell it to select it all, and it will go and select the points and the lines and the tax parcels and the subdivision, everything that touches, whether it actually is going to get impacted or not. When you tell it to select, it looks at everything that it touches. What we talked about earlier today, we talked about the topology. It's actually using that topology engine to figure out what's connected to this thing. That's what it's going to go and show you and list here, but it doesn't mean they're all going to get impacted. It just means that those are the things that are touching that polygon that you have selected right now. All right. I tend to not use this only because I like it simple. I want to know, here's the easy way to describe. This is what's going to get, what I'm going to cut. And if it's on, it's going to get cut. Any questions about the clip? As with all these, just go ahead and try them to figure out what's going on. Split into Kogo. This is where we have a line. All right, if I draw a polyline here, any type of line, just draw a polyline here. This is a polyline. That's a single line, one line, multiple vertices in it. It's a polyline. That line could be something that I copied and pasted in. For example, maybe I have a CAD file. CAD files usually are not split into discrete lines. Usually they might be just whatever the drawing needs. If I copy and select a CAD file in, it might come in as that. And I want to go and be able to use that where I can see what the individual bearings and distances are on each of those vectors, each of those things. I can use the split into Kogo, which is down here right next to the Kogo, split into Kogo lines, and it will go and split that. And I can have multiple lines selected. Here is very important. If you're going to use a template, you can split it into a different type of line. All right, these are what lot lines? Okay. If you do not use this, it will split it into lot lines. If you use it here, it will put it to a different layer. Just be aware of this function here. And then whether or not it splits lines with existing attribution. Did I interrupt somebody? Did I overwrite somebody? You have a question or comment? Okay. And again, it split it into Kogo lines, calculate the Kogo lines on there. If I look at those lines again, just sort of recognize that inside the parcel fabric, it's going to say these lines are from the geometry. So it will mark those as saying, yes, that would you use the update Kogos or split into Kogo lines, and that's where those values came from. They were not input by the mapper. Again, keeping track, building this database of data. Where did this come from? How, can I rely upon that? Those sorts of things. This is a nice tool. Just be aware that whether or not you have a template set and whether it's going to be the exact same one or whether you're going to convert it to a different layer. Sequential numbering tool. Sequential numbering tool. I think we talked about this before. Let's go in here. And I think I showed this with the I don't even know if we have labels on these. Let's go. We have a subdivision. Sorry, I'm talking to myself here. Go. Zoom to this one. Let's make this active layer. Okay, here's my new sub. And here is where we use the sequential numbering tool. All right. And that sequential numbering tool allows you to go and select. Let's go to here. Here, sequential numbering tool is here under attributes. It allows you to go and select the layer. These do not have to be selected, just to let you know. It does not have to be selected in here. What attribute fields you want to go and populate. And then the format is very important because you tell it whether or not to pad the numbers with zeros in front of them or whether to just keep them at just the integer value that's being shown. What the start value is, 1. What the increment is, 1. Again, you do not have to select anything because now if I go in here and do this, what's going to happen is, I think there's a lot here. Yeah, there is 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, it does not go according to what is selected, but what you go through, where you draw that line through as far as how these things are input on here. What the key to this again is learning how to use this format function. This kind of tells you a little bit. You can prepend, you can put things at the end. You can do all sorts of tricks in here to go and do it. Summer, you had a question?
Yes, so if you wanted to change your number, say, oh no, I want number 1 where number 7 is that easy to do or not?
If I
Change.
wanted to reverse this and
Yeah.
reverse the order for all of them.
Change the order, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
it's just, oh, I want to
Just
go. And there's a couple ways.
Okay.
Okay. I can say that maybe I want to go 7, but I want to increment by a -1. Right. So then I can go and so here to here to here to here. All right. 7 to a -1. I could go that way, or I can go and say 1, 1, actually start at 7, and I go here to here to here. Actually, I'm doing it wrong. Start at 7, start at 1, increment by 1, and start at one end and versus going the other way. Yeah, it just depends upon what's the sequence of the polygon that you're intersecting and what value is it storing in that polygon. Okay. And again, there's all kinds of tricks in here doing increments. One of my clients has they have a 0 at the end of it so that they increment them by 10 instead of incrementing by 1 and then padding a 0. So many different ways. You know, I could say, well, let's put a 0 at the end here and increment it by 1. Now it's okay here, 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 here. These will now have zeros at the end. Or I can say just same thing, increment it by 10, and we'll do that. I started it on that. But yeah, it's again, it increments lots of little tricks to do this, but it just if once you understand what this is doing and what this is doing, it's you can use it to your benefit. Scott.
And if the big lot in the middle was a street, would you just do this twice, do the top row and then do the bottom row?
That's exactly right. That's thank you for mentioning that, Scott. So yes, so if that's the case and you don't want to do that street, I would do it this way. Here to here, double click, okay, and then here to here, double click. All right, so that you do it in different iterations, so that if you have blocks, you would do all the block, stop, go and start it again at the next block and do it that way. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Does
Good
this
point.
update the attributes for these polygons?
Yeah,
It's just
that's it. That's it. All it's really doing is just going and updating this attribute here. So here, here. So if on this
so
tool,
for instance, if the street number 31 was in there, if we wanted to get rid of it, we would just go into the attribute table
Take
and
it
delete
here.
the 31. Is that how
go
we
and
would do
say and
that?
delete that, yeah. Or make that road or whatever the attribute would be for that. Yeah.
So this is just okay.
It's just a tool to help you attribute sequential references. There's nothing worse than having 100 lot subdivision and you having to click every one of those parcels to change the attributes on it. It's fine with just 1 or 2, but when you have a lot of them, no pun intended, if you have many of them, it's easier to do a sequential numbering of some sort for it. Yes, definitely. And it is a nice tool. It's one that, like I said, there was a script that you could add inside of ArcMap called SnakePin. It did basically the same thing. Not quite as many bells and whistles, but you could do the same thing. If you're building lots and if you're keeping track of lots, this is this is a huge time saver on there. Duplicate vertical. By the way, let me go and show you another tool that I don't think I have here because it's just a standard tool. Is that there is a tool called, let's go back here. There's a tool called transfer attributes. Transfer attributes is very, very interesting. Again, this used to be an ArcMap. It works a little bit different here inside of Pro, but the transfer attributes allows you to go and take and select one attribute, one feature, and take and transfer some attributes from that one feature into a different feature. They don't even have to be the same layer. They can be different layers so that, for example, if I have two road layers or street layers or something, and I want to transfer the names from this layer into this layer, first thing I would do is I would go and do a field mapping and say, take the values out of, and again, I'm making this up as I'm going, out of this layer, this field, and put them into this layer. And these are here, this layer, this field. So I could go and match and do a crosswalk and say, take the value out of that field, put it here. take the value out of that field, put it here. And then once I set that in place, once I go and say transfer the attributes, I click on the one and it will find that layer. And then I can say paste it over there and it will go and paste it over to that layer. So transfer attributes allows you to go and transfer the values that are stored in those attributes from one feature to a different feature. So for example, if I wanted to go and transfer between these and say, take these values and transfer them into this lot instead, I would do field mapping and say, these are lots to lots. All right, and it will go and transfer them back and forth. If I need it, I could say, well, take the name field and put it also in a different field, but let's just leave it at this. And now I can transfer these values and put them over here. All right, and now this has the attributes of that. Again, for little tricks for transferring attribution, that's really a nice way to do it. While I'm in here and talk about tricks and such, let's talk. Here's another way of doing it. I'm going to go and I have 2 polygons selected. Again, I want to know that I also can take this value and do a copy my attributes from here and paste them into this one. Same thing, very simple. I can do copy and paste inside of my attribute pane. So let's go and do this and this and not, let's only select the lots. All right. I can say, take this value, copy those values, and paste them into every single one of my parcels. They are all now the same thing. So I can copy and paste inside of here as far as attribution on here. Believe me, once you do a lot of attribution, you learn these little tricks, how to go and move things back and forth without having to type them in constantly. Okay, sequential numbering. Duplicate vertical. This is a tool which allows you to go and stack polygons. Now, there's 2. There's a duplicate vertical or duplicate parcel. Duplicate vertical is the standard Pro tool, ArcGIS Pro tool. It just stacks polygons, boom, 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 right on top of one another. So if I have this one here, that's my lot, I can then go and say, where is it here? Duplicate vertical. Duplicate vertical says, okay, here it is. How many times do you want to go and do it? And how many offsets? This is for 10-foot offset. I want to do it 8 times. Now, when I go in here and duplicate this, I now have I have 9 polygons stacked on top of one another. If you, for example, I think I've mentioned before, we have a contract with an appraiser's office and assessor's office, and we are building 3-dimensional vertical condominium units. That's what this is for, that sort of thing, which you stack them. And if you go and I could then go and visualize this and you'll see those stacked polygons on top of one another. That's
But only if they're identical, right?
Yes, this will identically duplicate that polygon over and over and over and over on top of one another. Yeah.
So we could have condo units that are not identical from floor to floor.
Oh yeah, we constantly. I could take one of those. I could take one of these. Let's see, take this one here. Only select this one. And I can reshape that. I could change the size of that or reshape that one. All right. So I can replace that geometry instead of being that shape. it's actually going to be that shape. All right. So now I have all of those 9 polygons, but one of them, and I forget which one it was, I clicked on, there it is there. That one has a different shape on it. They're still duplicated vertically. They are still sized vertically. They still have their own attribution as far as if I'm looking at vertical condos, what the floor elevation is, what the floor level is, what the condo unit is, all that, but they are now stacked vertically. So they don't have to be exactly the same, but they just have to be, they have to have some Z value on them. But this tool will go and stack the polygons for you on top of one another. Cul-de-sac tool. Cul-de-sac tool, and again, this is one that even without the parcel fabric you can use. So let's go and create a line. Let's go and do let's turn on our tax parcels again. Turn off that. All right, so if I have a street center line in here, I can use my cul-de-sac tool, and it's down in my Kogo area, cul-de-sac tool, to go and build a cul-de-sac. And with this, I can go and tell it, where do I want this to go? Do I want it to be built at the start of the line or at the end of the line? What's my street width? In this case, let's do a half a chain. Let's do a radius of 60-foot radius, and you can see it's starting to go and build. And my return radius here, let's say this is a 20-foot return. It will go and do that. And it won't do it until I hit create. It will just show me what it's going to look like. All right. So there it is there. Again, it's still built all on the tax line. So let's take this, and instead of that, let's go and let's go and edit the vertices. Let's go and add a vertex here. And let's go and make it there. All right. Let's go back to here. And this time we're going to build it at the other end of this. And I'm going to really exaggerate this so that we can see what happens when we have bends in the lines. All right, it allows us to do an offset, allows us to go and build them. It uses the radius from whatever point we decide to start at. The street width is the width in here. Be aware that street width is the total width from here to here. If we go and measure, here, from here to here, it's not what each side of it is, but what the total right-of-way width is. So just be aware of that. On there, it's the right-of-way width is you take half of it from the center line on there. Is there a way to do offset off of baseline? No, unfortunately, this is centered and it's split inside of this. So it's whatever that width is, it's divided in half and it's paralleled off that line. And then the return values on there. It's an interesting tool. Those of us that have been doing this for a long time kind of know how to build cul-de-sacs, but you know, it's an interesting tool. How does it handle curves is often we get a question. Well, how do you handle curves on here? Let's do it this way. Okay, so again, I can go to cul-de-sac, tell it to go and build it off of here. Here's an interesting thing though, is that it will only work off of one line, one selected line in here. So if I have this, these will have to be merged into a single line, a single right-of-way line. Merge this into, let's unselect that. Merge these points together here, merge those lines. And then I can go to cul-de-sac and say, do it off the end of the line. So it will only merge off of a single center line there. All right. Cul-de-sac tool. All right. Workflows. One of the questions that often is like, okay, you showed us these tools. Well, how do we use them? Well, when you have, for example, what you're attempting to go and create is you're attempting to go and do a merge or a combine or however you call it in the individual county, how you decide to do it. Here is very simplified. Here's the workflow, upper level. Create the record, select the parcels to be merged, select the merge tool. I should probably put in here, set the options, and then attribute the merge on there. That's all it is. Just do those when you go and merge that. It will if the merge tool will automatically go and set what historic, it'll eliminate whatever is not needed, those sorts of things for you. Then the option or the workflow for creating a new parcel that's resulting from a meets and bounds description. Meets and bounds description is one in which starts at a point of beginning and then goes and traverses around back to the point of beginning. And the difference is this option is when you don't know exactly where it is and where the boundaries are. When it's an entire parcel, you create the record, input the boundaries using the traverse tool, close the traverse, create the seeds, build the parcel, align the parcel, then clip it and attribute your new parcels. This is probably the most intense. This is the one that Esri likes to show a lot, and that this is how do you create a parcel from lines? This is what this is. How do you create a parcel from new lines? And you want to go and describe how to go and do it. Again, that's fairly simple. Create a record, draw the lines, go in. So create a record. Let's create a new record. It is. Draw the lines using the traverse tool if you want. Text parcel lines, set the here. And then I can go and tell it here. Again, I'm purposely going and making sure this thing doesn't close. I can tell it, go ahead and close this thing by putting the asterisk there and tell it automatically to close. So I make sure it closed. I can then go and adjust it here. I can then go and once I'm done with that and I'm happy with those lines, I can tell it to create the seeds, build it out, align it, tell it where I want this thing to go. And there's a whole bunch of issues here because I just did that so sloppily. I can say, go ahead and generate these and see what it's going to look like. I can add additional links if I need to. Say that this one actually goes to here. Tell it to regenerate. Watch what happens when I tell it that this one goes to here. Tell it to regenerate. All right. I tell it that that goes there. That goes there. Let's create an anchor point here and say it's supposed to anchor there. Tell it to regenerate. Every time you add something, you want to tell it to regenerate what it's going to look like, and then align it up, put it in place, then clip it. All right, tell it just to clip everything out underneath it. So here's my remaining parcel. Here's my new parcel on here. I real quickly showed you a whole bunch of options with that align parcels tool that we hadn't covered before because I usually only expose that a little bit at a time. The align parcels tool, you could see that I went and adjusted where it was going to put these points. Each time I made an adjustment, I told it regenerate, so it shows me a preview of what it's going to look like. I used new links that were outside the tolerance, regenerated. I also used an anchor point that said that one is never supposed to change, regenerated, so that you could see all the different options on there with align parcels. Align parcels is a very powerful tool, but you have to learn how to go and use it. There's a lot of different little tricks in there. But that is it. That's the first option. This is kind of the one that you're going to use a majority of the time for splits and things of that sort. That's option number one. Any questions on that? Anybody want me to go back and do that again? Or do you just want to watch the recording? I do this stuff in the sleep. I can do this like that, almost with my eyes closed. So none. All right. Second option. This one's a little bit tougher. This one, it has a meets and bounds description. But the caveat is that it says that portion of the following parcel lying northeast of the following described line. Okay, it's sort of a combination in that it basically is taking a parcel and it's giving you a meets and bounds line and saying, that's where it's supposed to go to. And this is how to do it. Create the record, select the parcel that's going to be split. Kind of know what parcel it's coming out of. And then select copy lines 2, and then draw that new division lines in. Create the seeds to make sure that these lines close. Build the parcel to make sure it builds the polygons correctly as you want, and then attribute them. So this one, create a new record. All right. Then I'm going to select this parcel, and I'm going to do copy lines 2. And I'm going to copy it to the same thing because I'm going to split this parcel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create the lines that are going to be used to go and build this. And I'm going to draw the lines, and maybe it's, here's the meets and bounds description for that parcel on here. That is because I use this line, this is a one single line. If I used this one, this is multiple lines. It's a series of lines, each of them being a separate line on there. All right. Know the tools. Know the tools you have. Polyline, 2-point line. Freehand, trace, radial. This is right angle, or this could be, this is right angle. This is a splitting a line. So I could split a line there. So there's all my lines. Draw the lines that's described on that meets and bounds portion of it. I then tell it to create the seeds to illustrate that it's going to have 2 parcels, one on each side of the line, and I tell it to build. If I look, it actually has the historic parcels in there already. This is option number 2. Again, the difference is option number 1, you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it goes on top of. Option 2, you know what the parcel that it's coming out of. Next option, splitting an aliquot description. This is where you have a parcel and the description says east 100 feet or the west 100 feet of this parcel. Create the record. Select the parcel to be split. Select divide. Select the input or criteria. Select the edge to be parallel to, and then select divide and attribute. So if we go in here and let's say that this says the east 100 feet of this parcel, we create the record, select the parcel, then select divide, and tell it what the width is. In this case, that was 100 feet. And select that it's coming from the east side here, and then say divide. It creates here, creates a new parcel and updates those on there. Any questions, any discussions on this? This is one of my favorite for aliquot descriptions, but we get a lot of public land survey system breakdowns. You know, here. Be careful though, this is a private division. This is not an aliquot description where you're breaking down a section. It's describing it as width here than anything else. What happens if you have a curved or irregular boundary? This is one in which there's a little bit more creativity, a little more tools that you might use. This is a create a record, select the parcel to be split, and then tell it what that input line is. And then select and split it in here. It's a lot of different options here. So let's say that we're splitting and we want to find the western and northern 50 or 100 feet parallel to that line there. How do we do that? Create a new record. Oh, create a new record. All right, select the parcel. All right, so I have to go and draw a line and I have to go and tell it where to split. I will probably on this one, let's talk about my theory or my discussion that there's a lot of different ways to do this. I can draw a line and then use the split tool, or I can do copy lines 2 and draw the lines and build the seeds and do it. Again, let's do this one. Let's do a copy lines 2. And now let's take these lines, this line, and go parallel to those. So copy parallel. And tell it we want to use the same line type. And we want them to be copied into separate layers. We want not layers, separate features, so that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers that are created, or 5 lines that are created. And these are going to be 50 feet, I said. And then I have to tell it it's going to be on the right side of the line, and tell it to go ahead and copy and paste those in. Copies and paste them in. I then have to go and extend and trim these up. So I can use the extend and trim tool, or I can use the line intersect tool. The extend and trim tool basically will allow me to go and extend this line. And as I move over that line, it will show me that it can be extended to that line. And it will extend it to that line. It will not split these two on here. If I go to the other end here, this one here, that was the extend trim. The line intersect tool allows me to go and say, take this line and intersect them. And when I click here, it will go and not only extend that line, but it will trim and split this line where they intersect. So again, depending upon what you want to do with the tool, use different components to it. Extend and trim will extend it out, but not split the line. Line to intersect will intersect the two lines and split them at the intersections. To finish with this, I can create the seeds. All right. There's my other seed, and tell it to build my 2 out. So that's using sort of the parcel fabric tools to go and do that. Do we have any questions on this?
Frank,
Yes.
one tool I use constantly is the proportion tool, proportion align. I don't recall discussing that one yet. Is that going to be coming up anytime soon?
Actually, we've talked about it. Let me go and show you. Again, let's go and create a line here. Thank you, Jeffrey, by the way. Let's create a line, and let's put it as a distance of 610 feet. All right. 610 feet is what we have here. Proportional line. What does a proportional line do? It takes information and distributes it proportionally throughout that line. All right. But what are you really doing? You're dividing the line. So the divide tool, when we have a line selected, it allows us to go and inside of here with the varying distances, for example, which I think is how you're going to be using this, we can tell it, well, we want to go 200 feet. Then we want to go 300 feet. And then maybe we have a 100 foot right here. Distribute this remaining line proportionally. This is the old proportion line tool. It's called the divide because that's really what you're doing is you're dividing a line amongst there. And I can say divided, and it will now have 3 lines proportionally distributed. Any excess or deficiency. It tells you what the excess is here, that this is actually 10 feet longer. And if we look at this and divide these tools, divide these lines up, they have the COGO values in here. But if we look at that 100 foot, it's actually, the shank length is 101.668 feet. 200 is 201.33, and the 300 is actually 304.999. So the proportion tool is now been not necessarily renamed, but it's been integrated into the divide tool on there. Can you think of another way that the proportion tool was used other than dividing a line?
No, not offhand.
Yeah, I can't either. The only thing they haven't put in here, and it was not in standard ORMAP tools, but it was in the ORMAP parcel. ORMAP parcel fabric tools was the ability to go and proportion along multiple lines so that you could have a line that went from here to here, and then your next line will go to here, and you could select both of those lines and proportion along them. They haven't built that in here yet. That was called spanning the lines. That's not there yet. So you have to separate, you have to use them as two separate lines when you're doing that. But yeah, the proportion tool, it's called divide. It's in the divide tool now. And it is, again, as it on here, you do it with the varying lengths, and it allows you, let me see here. If I do it by this one, there is no proportion option. If I do it here, I do have distribute the remaining length equally. That sort of proportion it out into, because these are all the same value. And this is the varying, and this allows you to go and distribute it proportionally, depending upon how you do that. Interesting thing that you may wind up discovering is that when I go and split a parcel, when I do a clip on a parcel, it actually clips the COGO value and gives us the remaining value proportional. So in here, this is a computed line in here. That line itself, this line here is marked as being computed, meaning the software calculated what those values are. If I split that in half, or if I cut it, it actually calculates what the proportion value is on that line. It doesn't use the shape length, it uses the COGO values and distributes those COGO values through there. So anytime it's doing any of those splits or anything else, it's proportioning if it has COGO values on it. It's an interesting sort of nuance in there as far as how it calculates them. Yeah, curves are irregular. It's in this case, this is always the same. It's like you have to create that irregular boundary and figure out where it's going to go and intersect on here. I can tell you there's something that Esri is working on, and I've given them feedback on it. In here, when I did the parallel, there was so much difference in here that it didn't automatically do the extend. Esri's trying to figure out, is there an option, or should there be an option that says, allow you to tell it how far to automatically extend it if it's within a certain variance, to automatically do that without you having to do that. They're working on that, trying to figure out, is that something that they should build into the parallel option on here? That might be useful in the future. All right, processing a subdivision, again, this is one of those things where we've kind of been through, and it really is nothing more than taking those first couple of workflows and applying them to different layers. In this case, this is our first option, number one, where we create the subdivision polygon, create the record, input the boundary, close it, create the seed, build the subdivision, align it, clip it if you want to take everything else out, or if you're just building it on top, and then attribute. That's fine. Again, that's option number one of all of our workflows. Second option, processing it if you're building the lots inside the subdivision. Well, in this case, you can either create a new one or reuse the record for the subdivision, and then select it, select copy lines 2, and use the divide and traverse tools, and then put the tax lines, create the seeds, build the tax lots, use sequential numbering for the attribution. If you can learn these, the parcel fabric becomes intuitive, and it actually becomes part of what you normally would do while you're doing your normal mapping and workflows. Oh, there you go, Jeffrey. It's there on page 69. This is the overages and shortages within a subdivision. If you use the divide tool on lines, it allows you to proportionally distribute these overages and shortages within the subdivisions. All right. I think we're going to stop for a break, half-hour break. When we get done, we're going to start looking at some of the quality identifiers. We're also going to start looking at some of the quality control components in here built in, and do maybe some error checking and validation on here. Let me see, control points. And that's actually, Dean, I think we're at the point now where we may be fast approaching. This is for tomorrow's lecture, I think. All the tasks that you built in.
Now you can keep talking.
Oh, I know, I can keep talking. Well, what I'll do is I'll flip over to just sort of some settings and go through some of those, and maybe look at some of the data design stuff. So I'll keep
I'm
talking.
good. Whatever you want in the schedule. If you want to start tomorrow with the rules or with the tools, we can. If you want to hold, at the end of the day, let's just pick. And however you want to do it.
So since we have a smaller group who are very quiet, by the way, they don't ask a lot of questions. They've just let me keep talking and talking. So we're actually ahead of ourselves on the schedule here, but let's see what we can do. So let's take a break now. Let's come back at 25 after the hour, and please have some comments or questions or things to talk about. This is ORMAP has paid for me to give these hours of training to you. Please make it worthwhile for you. So please come back with questions and such. I'm going to pause the recording, and thank you all. We are back again. Let me go and turn off this notice telling us the people coming in and out. All right. So Erica says she was distracted. It's all right. And let me go and show you one more time where we've got some sort of an aliquot description along a curved, because I mentioned there are multiple ways of doing it. So I've got a curve here, and let's go and just suppose that what we're doing is we're taking 50 feet off of this parcel here. Again, as many things, there's multiple ways of doing it, but let's go through at least one way. Let's go and create a record again. If we want it to track, we always want to create a record. And then let's approach it as if this is a standard type of cartography thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line in here. And that line, we can go ahead and draw it, and we can make it, again, a couple ways we can do it. We could do a trace with an offset to go and do that. Let's do this. Let's do a trace. And on the trace function, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to type in O for offset and tell it that I want to trace this with an offset, and so that we can see it, let's do it 50 feet. All right. Now, when I do this, I now can see that it's actually tracing it, but it's on the wrong side of the line. When I hit tab, it will go and begin drawing it on the other side, on the left side of this line instead. When I do this, I'm going to go and draw that line again, trace with an offset. And it'll allow me to do tab, allows me to go back and forth. To get to the offset options, you have two ways of doing it. I can type in O for options, or I can right click and it goes trace options here. So let's go ahead and finish this line. Finish the line. I drew the line as a trace line in here, but it allowed me to go and create the line, trace it over, so I have a line there that I can go and intersect. At this point, I've got a couple of interesting things I can do. I can use the split command against this parcel. So if I go and go to split command, all right, I can do it with a feature. Now, since I already have that line selected, because I just input it, I can say, let's go ahead and use that line, and then tell it that I want to go and split. That was my input line, my input feature. Tell it that I want to go and split this parcel, and I select that here. And again, that's by doing it by feature instead of interactively. And I can tell it to split it. It will go and split that polygon there. All right? One way of doing it. Another way of doing it is I could go back, and instead of doing that split interactively, let's go back here and undo this split. There's my line. I can say instead, I'll select the line and I'll do a split, but this time I'll do it interactively, in which case I'm going to go and trace that line that I drew. Oh, I have to turn off my offset. So I'm going to go to O for offset and say, nope, no offset here. Now, when I go and trace this, it will go and trace this all the way through. And now when I finish, it will go and split those two. So again, I could draw the line beforehand. By the way, down here, I was sloppy when I started it. I could select the line and then do a split by feature, because I forgot that thing I'm going to cut with already selected. Or I could back into it by drawing the line and then select what I want to cut and then tell it to split it interactively by going that way and doing that. I could also, again, I could have selected the parcel, done a copy lines to, and then just sort of paralleled and doing create a line by tracing with an offset that curved line again. There's so many different ways of doing it, and it will wind up with the same results. You will wind up with the two parcels in there as you go, and it really becomes a thing of how comfortable am I with these tools? Which ones do I know how to use? And which ones can I become most efficient with? I'm gonna stop talking. Comments, questions?
That is just really helpful for me. Thank you for going over that again. I just had a 1 foot partition line along the same kind of like curve, and I ended up having to just put in all the meets and bounds and curves and try to join it in, and it was a mess. And this would have been so much cleaner and nicer. So thank you.
Yeah, so again, it's using sort of Esri's built-in ArcGIS Pro Tools. One of the really one of my favorite tools was that thing that I just showed you, that trace with an offset. Oh my gosh, it is so nice once you understand how that thing works. Um, it is a nice tool. Again, I can go in here and say, let's go and create a new line here. And I can use the trace line here, trace it, and type in O for offset and tell it how much I want to offset it. And just know that if I do a 1 foot offset, know that that tab flips it back and forth between a positive or a negative, and do it that way. And now when I go in here and trace this, and usually I will almost always start on the outside, and now I will go and trace it and make sure that I'm on the inside. And as I'm tracing, it will go and trace that existing line as I'm going through. And if from a procedural standpoint, if you want to make sure that you intersect, I always go way beyond this, and then say, let's go ahead and finish. And then I can come in here and clean this thing up by doing extend trim and all the line intersect and everything. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. But again, remember, whether you decide to go to the fabric or not, that is a standard ArcGIS Pro tool. There's nothing special about that. That's just built in all the time. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and I don't see this on the agenda, so I'll bring it up. We have been inundated by Oregon Department of Transportation. They are, I think they're building ramps for handicap access on all the intersections. And so they're acquiring all these little bits and pieces of right-of-way adjacent to their already existing right-of-way. And they're using, the offset methods, station and offset, and know how to do that in ArcMap. Arc Pro is a little different. For one thing, it doesn't allow you to change direction.
Define changing direction.
Well, if you're giving it a station number that you're starting from, and you're following along the station, sometimes you're going north and sometimes you're going south from that station. But in ArcMap, you could just click a button and it would change the direction of the arrow, so which way you're going.
Interesting. So let's explore the offset tool. All right, inside of Pro. So the offset tool, again, as with most of these, there's a lot of different options here. You can interactively define your base map. All right, or if you have an existing feature, you can select that feature and tell it what it is and where it is. Let's go and start with just interactively. I can interactively define this base map, and this is let's use the trace tool to go and define this base map and tell it we want to start here, and let's just go to here. All right. That is our base map. And it tells us what the original orientation is, what the start is, and what the end is. So it gives us at least the length of that. We can then go and do an equation as far as what the stationing is that's called out on that DOT plan. All right, so let's go and say that this is supposed to be 505.25 here. I missed a 5. 505.25 here. All right. And that the end point, and I forgot what the length is, 411. Let's make this 938. All right, is the end equation. So it's at the range here. This is your equation for what those stationing is. So again, we developed this by doing interactively and tracing our baseline. Then what we'll do is we'll go and we'll give it what our stationing is. No pluses, these are just overall. So let's do our first one at 500. All right. And the offset, and this offset, we can make it, let's make it 50 feet to the left. All right. By the way, this is what's being put in here. So let's make sure that we go and tell it that we're going to put in tax lines here. So it's 50 feet to the left. All right. Our next one is now going to be 600 feet. And this is going to be, right now, this is set to be 50 feet to the left again. All right, let's make it something a little bit more what we might see, 75 feet to the left. So this is 500, 50 feet to the left, 600, 75 feet to the left. One of the things we want to be aware of is that with this, with the offset tool, it doesn't necessarily create it automatically. It's not like the traverse tool where every time we hit return, it's creating. This one does not. This one gives us a sketch like to tell us what it's like, but it doesn't actually create it. It's actually showing us a preview, but it doesn't create it until we actually say, create this thing, just to be aware. So let's go to 716 as our next one. And this is now, maybe it's 80 feet to the right. So this allows us to switch back and forth between here as we're going through this. All right. So you were saying that it doesn't allow you to go and switch the sides with a single line, or is that it?
Not the sides, the direction of the arrow you've got. So
Oh, this direction.
yeah. So I could
Oh,
see as you're doing it interactively, you can decide where it starts. Yeah, I can see that.
thank you. I misunderstood that. I misunderstood that. All right, so let's get off of this. Let's go and do it another way where we actually create and do a line. All right. Let's go and get at it. So we just align it here. We'll do the offset. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking. So if we do it by feature now, we want to go and switch this. Here's the Rosetta Stone. If I go in here and say edit features, all right, inside of here, come on, I now can, where is it? Reverse the direction. So I can reverse the direction of this line on here. So if I go back here under edit features, I can reverse the direction. And now when I go here, it will, this is the end, this is the start. Is that what you were looking for? Or are you looking for? Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So the reverse, the actual location of a line, the direction of a line is located under there, edit features. All right. And then once you're on edit features, then it allows you to go and right click on it and say, oh, let's reverse the direction here. Interestingly, and that's by the way the default here. So let's go and let's move it back to here. Interestingly, if we are in here and we go to traverse, all right, and we go and All right, we can actually go here and right click on this and reverse the direction while we're in the traverse tool on that line, and it will go and store the inverse direction on there. The edit vertices reverses the direction of the line, but I don't think it changes the COGO values, or it's just actually, maybe it does. I probably should have put it, shown the labels on there, but this actually reverses the direction while we're in the traverse. So let's go and show those labels here. And let's go and do our label functions. And this should be COGO right. And let's tell it, go and show the bearings. There we go. So now when we go in here, let's check here. Let's go to edit vertices, and let's go here, and then let's reverse this. Oh, it did. It also reversed the bearing on that, not just the starting and ending point, but it reversed the bearing for the COGO values if they were stored COGO values. Did that help, Scott? They hit it
Yep.
here.
Yep.
They hit it in here. But yeah, with the offset tool, if you get to use it a lot, there's a couple things you want to do. I think it would be a good idea to go and say, have it so that you can reverse these lines if you're using an existing feature on here. But by default, they
These are really annoying because, you know, they have stationing from center lines that they've surveyed, but they haven't published the survey yet. So they typically don't publish the survey until after the project's done. So we have to recreate the center line from the information they give us and then figure out where the stations go. It's just for like a 50 square foot piece of land or something.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
I completely understand because it drives me crazy also. So yeah, it's I'll often, when I use this, and I admit I don't use this as much as I probably could or should, my preference is to go and create that thing interactively so that you have control over how it's created and what's created and such. But yeah, often we'll do it. If you have lines representing those things, do it by selecting those lines and building off of that. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? What else have we got that's been bothering you? Again, use this time to go and help sort of understand a little bit more about Pro. Back here. Oops. All right. Anything else? Anybody else have any comments or anything else on here? All right. You're all too quiet. Okay, so let's look at inside the parcel fabric. There are some quality identifiers on here. And this is one of the areas where from an evaluation standpoint, the parcel fabric has a real advantage over just traditional parcels and using the standard components on here. We're going to talk about two of these. One is going to be highlighting gaps and overlaps. Another one is going to be sort of these identifications and quality controls indicating layers. So let's start with a simple thing here. Topology. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Somebody tell me, good or bad? What is it? It's a pain to work with, right? And if really what you want to do is identify gaps or overlaps, it's if you're not in the parcel fabric, you have to do it. That's right. That's the only way that you can identify those things. However, it is a function that we've had to live with for a very long time that a lot of us don't understand really what's going on. In topology, standard geodatabase topology, there's 3 steps that topology goes through when you go and you tell it to validate my topology. All right. The first step is it looks at every feature that's inside and included in your topology. It looks at every feature on every layer, and it intersects. It intersects all the other features that are included in all the other layers in your topology. This is called cracking. It goes through this cracking process. And that's the reason why in your data, if you include layers from a lot of, or features from a lot of different layers, you wind up introducing vertices in your data that you may not be aware of. Because every time you validate topology, it goes through and re-intersects this so that if you've got 2 features that cross one another, suddenly you will wind up with a vertex at those 2, even though you never put it in there. This is called cracking. The next step is called clustering. And there is a setting inside your topology called a cluster tolerance. So what it really does is it looks at those vertices that get created and evaluates where they fit inside this cluster tolerance inside of here. And if you have 2 vertices that are existing inside the cluster tolerance, it pulls them all together and replaces them with a single vertex. It's called clustering. First, it cracks your data, then it clusters the data. Once it does that, then it goes through and looks at the rules that you've created and evaluates those rules according to how these vertices interact with one another. So when you are evaluating whether or not a line is on top of another line, really what it's doing is evaluating whether those vertices are the exact same values. It really is coordinate coincidence that's being applied to your data when it evaluates these rules to see, oh, these rules are the same. These lines are on one another or they are not on one another. It's using coordinate coincidence against the vertices on those features that it creates as part of this cracking and clustering. Long-term effect is that your data is getting changed every time you go and validate topology. And this is what's often called coordinate creep, because it goes and moves things a little bit tiny. Again, that cluster tolerance is really small, but it's moving things around. It's introducing vertices, it's moving things around. It's just many of us that are data bigots. I'm a data bigot. I want clean data. I don't want anybody introducing things and moving things around when I know where that data is. So it's not a good thing from that standpoint. Well, with the parcel fabric, what Esri has done is introduced some new ways using spatial statistics to analyze the data so that you can look for gaps and overlaps without running topology validation. All right. And those are on the quality. Let me go and pin this again. They're in the quality tab as part of your parcel component. And here's the first one. This is the highlights. This is highlights the gaps and overlaps between parcels in your current view extent. And with 3.2, you have this option to say, hey, do it on all my layers and evaluate all my layers back and forth. Previously, you didn't have that option. All you had to pick one layer at a time to do this. Let's go and turn on these layers. All right. Let's go on the layers and do highlight now and say, let's do it against all layers. This again uses spatial statistics to analyze whether or not these are on top of one another without cracking, without clustering, any of that. It only works inside the current view extent. And this maximum width says, if I have a space between, if I have a gap between polygons, perhaps that's intended. Perhaps that's part of my data model. So for example, my rights of way, they're not going to appear as gaps. So I'm going to tell it what's the maximum width of the gap that I'm going to identify. So if it's greater than this, I'm not going to identify it. And then how do I show the gaps? I want to use red instead of yellow. How do I show the overlaps on here? And literally all I have to do is click on this and it will go and evaluate them to see whether or not I have gaps or overlaps on here. So there's actually a dashed line showing the extents of my data that's been analyzed. So I can move out here and say, okay, we'll highlight this now and see if I have any gaps or overlaps in here. In this case, I probably don't. Right now, I'm looking through all my layers to see if I find them.
And now,
Let's
Frank,
go. Yes,
this is not changing the data, correct?
correct. This is not in any way impacting the data. It is not doing validate topology. It is using
That is so cool because if the thing that used to get us so badly was that in the old topology rules, any member participating in the topology when you did validation, it would apply to everything in the topology, even if you weren't editing them. And what a nightmare. So if you're going to do topology checks, this is the cool way to do it. That's so fun. Thank
but
you.
this is only within the parcel fabric. And now I
good with that.
actually think that eventually this is going to migrate into just regular ArcGIS Pro, where this is going to be an alternate to the validation. But right now they're using it as a selling point for this. So let's go and create something. Just again, let's go and create a problem here. Let's go down here to a tax lot and let's zoom in here and let's just let's create a record just to make sure that it's in the parcel fabric. All right. And let's go and create. So we have a record, an active record. Going to go and do this. I'm holding down my think of within that. Let's go ahead and build this. All right. And let's go and highlight. I think that's 10. Let's go and highlight here. And let's see if in fact, let's go and make this. Again, I don't know what my scale is here, but let's clear this and there we go. So now it went and identified where my, in this case, where my overlap was on here with my maximum element in here. Identified it, showed it to me. It has done nothing. All it did is say, hey, if this is the criteria that I've got, let's see if I have any. In this case, I do. It has not changed the data. It's not modified it, not done anything, but it's left it up to me. Maybe I want to go and fix this. It doesn't mean you have to. All it does is say, you've got, using the criteria that you put in, you've got an overlap here. Do you want to fix it or not? It's up to you. Now, I could use tools to fix it. For example, I could use the, where am I here? The align feature tool that I've showed before. Maybe I want to go in and not sure what this is, but let me go and draw something and say, let's go from here to here and make sure that they all line up correctly. And there it is. Let's go and evaluate this again, and it's gone. But this highlight gaps and overlaps, especially in 3.2, the fact that it has allowed me to go and say, do this against every layer on here. It will evaluate subdivisions against tax parcels against subdivisions, tax parcels against lots. It will evaluate all of them without changing anything, just an evaluation between them. All right. You can do it just within a single layer, but this part in 3.2 has just become very, very valuable. And it only works inside your display extent. And again, I can then go in and clean it out from there. I could have selected it and done an align parcels. That's again one of my options. I could do align features, I could do align parcels, however I want to clean it up. But they leave it up to you to figure out how do you clean it up. This is a nice tool inside the parcel fabric. It allows you to go and figure out what are you going to fix and how are you going to fix it. All right. This one, again, really nice on here. I like this a lot. The other thing is that from a quality standpoint, it allows you to go and evaluate and display certain components. And I think I've shown you this before on my layers. I can tell it and use some quality display components. For example, I have a distance mismatch on my parcel layers. To do this, I first say, okay, I want to do it on my tax lot parcels, and it will go and create a display layer. This display layer will go and show me, and let's go into the properties of here. Here is the source. It is my data. I have a definition query set. I actually have two. I have the option of, is it just current lines or is it current and historic lines that I'm evaluating? So in this case, just current lines. And if I look at this and edit this, it's actually saying, what I want to do is I want to find the absolute value of my arc length, in this case with a curve, minus my shape length. Show me the variance and whether or not it's greater than 1/2 of a foot plus 100th of a foot times the arc length. So it's giving some variance in there. And it's retired. Or show me the absolute difference between, if the absolute difference between the distance field and the shape length is more than 1/2 of a foot plus this additional variance in there, and it's not retired, go and display it. That's all that this is doing. This is going and evaluating the COGO values that are stored versus the actual shape length of this. and allowing you to go then and see a table of these lines that have a difference, a variance between the two. So for example, let's go in and look at this one here. And all it really does is it goes and highlights it in this color and has a label that says what the mismatch is. So it's showing me that the arc length has a greater variance from the actual shape that's drawn. Often what we'll do is we'll take this display layer, because it really is just, it's a layer which is selecting out of there those features that have this variance. We'll take that and we'll put it underneath the tax lots so that we can then go and clearly see, okay, that's all of our tax lots. There's those variances where we have an issue with this, and we can zoom out here. Let's turn off our subdivisions and our lots and our condos. And we can quickly come in and see, where do we have anything else? Here's one here. Zoom into this one. On here. Clear that out. Okay. So there's sort of the variances that we have in here, and here's how we can see what those mismatches are inside of there. Trying to think what that's a densified curve is what that is. Yeah, it's a series of straight lines versus that. So there's, again, that's what this is. This is allows you to go and display areas where the data doesn't quite match what you've set up as the criteria, that it's supposed to be within this variance. Now, if you decide that that variance is too small or too big, you can change the variance on the definition query for that display layer and set it up for what your organization is looking for. But it's a way to go and evaluate. And this is sort of when we start changing our mind from being a cartographer into this curator of digital land record data. You can begin evaluating and redefining what you call a good parcel. A good parcel is one where not only does it not have gaps or overlaps between adjoiners, but it also matches the information of the original source data. If it doesn't match that information, then that may not be a good parcel. That might be something that you want to go and evaluate further. Questions on this yet? Anything? Again, all this really is this is just using some built-in ArcGIS Pro tools to go and allow you to set up a display layer that's set up to go and symbolize it a certain way and allow you to go in and see and visualize, oh, you've got a problem with this data. You want to go and evaluate it. Again, under the properties, under display, there's two I could do, only the current or current and historic on here. I can modify these, what criteria it's looking for. I can modify what's being displayed. I can modify the label expressions or what it's actually showing me. I can modify all of this and create it for myself if I want for my organization. So I have a standard set there for it. I also have the ability to go on any line feature class associated with my parcel types. I have one for the distance mismatch, one for line vertices. do I have vertices in the middle of my lines that I want to be able to clean up? Things that maybe from validate topology were brought in there. Or do I have short line segments in here? Let's see what short line segments are for my tax parcels. And again, it brings this up. I'm going to drag it down so it's inside of here. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to turn this on. And now let's go and look at some of these. Here I have a line segment that is 3/100 of a foot long. Now, perhaps that's supposed to be there. Again, it's not fixing it, but perhaps that's supposed to be there. And in this case, it's showing me that it's 3/100 of a foot long on there. It's showing me that there is a short segment in there that I need to be aware of. In this case, I have a short segment here. Perhaps this is not drawn correctly, and there's supposed to be something else in there on here. And this is a way to go and evaluate your property and say, is this valid data in here? How do you define a good parcel versus a bad parcel? And you see where this could be important. This could be something that you might use to go and figure out what's good and not good. Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, Gabe and Jeff, remember when we were talking about reviewing the countywide data set? This is it. So these, you know, we've got talked about values, but also a lot of these tools are just great ways to look at some of the features that came across from ORMAP. Not that you have to correct them now or anything else, but when we start talking about data reviewing, this type of validation on the geometry side is pretty cool. And we'll talk a little bit about validation of attributes. I've spent the last week using an ORMAP grant to become educated and potentially give you guys tools to review all the various attributes that are important in the process. And so we'll be looking at those as well in my segment tomorrow. So things to look at. And again, it is so nice having validation not be topology. In fact, we export everything out to a smaller data set for a record, run the topology, validate topology on it, and then let the users look at that so that we don't mess with the data. And really where we run into those problems is if you're looking for where validation can cause you problems with the validate topology is where you have those tangent lines coming in with the really nice slope. You can end up with some of the issues where you've got two lines that are very close to each other for a while. It can actually insert little tiny slivers and and they're meaningless and they're like 0.1 foot wide and maybe 10 feet long, but they're still messing up your data and it'd be nice to have it clean. So this is pretty fun. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, I really like this. And again, just evaluating this one data set, okay, against the tax lines, I got 19 of these short little line segments. What, you know, are they harming anything? No, but from the standpoint of trying to create clean data, it would be nice to clean that up. So the next question, so again, we can do that for the connection lines, which are the non-boundary lines. We can do that for the individual lines for any of the parcel types. We could do that for the tax lot lines, the condo lines, the lot lines, the subdivision lines. Do it for all of those lines and create separate ones for each of those. We can do it for the polygons and look at vertices that are on those polygons. Well, Once we identify them, again, it doesn't try to fix them because it doesn't impose that that's a problem. It lets you evaluate what is that a real problem, or is it something that you can just live with and go along? So let's just say that, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't see an option for area check. Like checking the area of the shape versus the area in the attribute.
So on here, let's make sure that I've got this correctly. Let's look at here. So in the parcel fabric, and I don't think we actually talked about this. Thank you. In the parcel fabric, there is, that's this one. This is purely the parcel fabric. There are a total of 3 fields, 3 attribute fields that contain area. Okay. The first one, this is the standard ArcGIS area. This is the area of that feature in whatever map units you've got this on. So this is the shape area. All right. And then we've got another one here inside the parcel fabric called calculated area. This is comparable to the shape area, and it's derived from the shape area. And that can be set to anything you want it to be. And we'll show you here in a minute. And then you've got this one called stated area. This is the area that is actually listed on an official document. This could be the area of a subdivision, the area of a lot, the area of a parcel, whatever. It can be whatever area. But the unique part is that inside of this attribution, we have the ability to go and define what is that area. So, for example, some of our clients, if a parcel is greater than 1 acre, 1 acre or above, they list in the stated area that it's an acre. However, if it's less than an acre, or if it's a lot, they list it as being square footage because it's less than an acre. So inside of here, we have the ability to set the stated area as an acre, but set the stated area units as being any of these. It could be a hectare, an acre, meters, square feet, change. Any of these area units can be set as the unit for that, so that just as we could mix linear units, we could also mix area units within, as they defined within a polygon. Dean, you want to say something?
Yeah, could you slide back over so we could see the attribute list, please? Just, yeah, so right above what you were talking about with the stated area is that we have we have legal acres and we have tax lot acre and tax lot feet, Scott.
I see here, yeah.
And so we actually have a tool that updates those from the calculated area. Originally, I had that be an attribute rule. Map acres comes from the shape area. And because in the ORMAP standard, we have to deliver optionally a tax lot feet and tax lot acre. And that was because we didn't have the smarts built into Fabric back then for the stated area. And I played around with an attribute rule that automatically updates map acre and tax lot feet and tax lot acre. That now is a tool, and we'll go over tomorrow, that actually populates them from calculated acres. But you've got options. You don't need to fill in tax lot acre. You could use the stated area, and obviously it's built in. So cool, go ESRI.
So there's some very interesting things about this. So by the way, you can always go and take this stated area and just put an alias on there. So when you export things, that stuff. But the interesting thing is that this stated area, again, this is something that you define. If in fact you have a parcel that's on the deed says it's 10 acres. But when you map it out, it actually winds up becoming 9.75 acres. All right. So there's a difference in there between what the actual deed says and what it's mapped out as. Well, you can store that. But here's where the interesting part comes in. If there is a value stored here in the stated area, if there is a value stored in the stated area, when I do something to split a parcel or clip a parcel or in any way modify that geometry of that polygon, it does not subtract one from the other, it proportions them. So if I have a parcel that is defined and mapped out as 9.75, but it states in the stated area that it is 10 acres. If I divide that parcel in half, the actual stated area says 5 and 5, even though it might say 4 point blank, whatever it is on here. Sorry, I'm horrible at math on the fly. So it would give you the calculated area of that shape, and it would proportion whatever the stated area is. So the stated area is what you would call the taxed lot acre or something. It's something that's on the official record somewhere. It says that's what it was. And then this calculated one is really more about the mapping component up there. So usually when we are setting up the parcel fabric, well, the shape area, we go and we define this as square footage. We give them the square footage of that. And then the calculated area will go and actually have it reflect back to us the acreage value. We're going to go over these in shortly. And then the stated area, in this case, if we know everything's coming out to acres, we'll define it as being acres. But if we don't, we'll leave that blank because that organization might say, well, if it's more than an acre, you put acres. If it's less than an acre, you put square foot. And you can mix those values together on there. Any questions on that? Any comments on that? Again, how it does that because it's only reflecting back to you what you've told it to reflect back. It's storing it all in meters, square meters is what it's doing. So it allows you to go and mix units up back and forth on there.
And just so you know, in the ORMAP tools environment, we do nothing with those. That's up to you in your local business process. The only thing that we're requiring is when you're sending the data as part of the cadastral standard, that you populate the tax lot feet and the tax lot acre. And then that becomes how you fit all this. You're free to however you want to work it out in your business process. And at Polk County, we actually, when you're initially doing a subdivision or a deed, whatever, is that we do populate the tax lot feet and the tax lot acre. And part of our review process is that's what we send as the voucher to our assessment and taxation system. But from that point on, we actually populate tax lot feet and tax lot acres from our assessment and taxation system. And there's lots of reasons for that. But again, I think what we're getting at here is that figure out your business process and make sure you're clean. And that's another area. Yeah, it would have been great if we had this 20 years ago. We wouldn't have the discussion about tax lot feet and acres because this is doing virtually the same thing. So pretty nice. Just something to look at when you're post-conversion. Thanks, Ray.
So just thinking about it, since we have time, Scott, you said, well, what about something that compares the acreage in here? So let's go and show you real quickly how to go and set something up to do that. All right, so I can go and take my tax lots and I'm going to go and copy my tax lots here. and I'm going to put them underneath here. And I'm going to just copy that layer. And I'm going to go and say, I'm going to set the definition query against it. And on that definition query, I'm going to say, yes, the retired by record, but I'm going to add, and the value that's stored, and let's say the shape area, and they've gone and used the definition query in here on here. The shape area is not equal to the area, and this, see how they actually calculate this. It does not include the value. It's less than or equal to. This is looking for all the numeric values in here. The calculated area. Yep, I got myself down a wormhole here. I'm going to go and do it easy by using so they're actually going and there's the short length. Here's the one that's got the distance in here. Yeah, they're using a SQL statement here. Oh, I could go in here and modify it, but we could set up a display area where these are tax lots that are small. All right, so let's just go and say, and the, come on, where the shape area is less than 1 foot or less than 1. Okay. Let's redefine this, and this is now slivers. Let's go and set the symbology on here. And let's just make this simple symbol. And all right. And now let's see if we have any slivers in here. Ah, less than 1 square foot. All right, so let's go and change this to the definition query of, let's say, 25 feet. None. $100 square feet. Oh, we got 1 parcel here. All right, so you got one that is small. It looks like it's a sliver almost. Yeah. So again, this, what you're showing here is just using, in this case, it's actually ArcGIS Pro. It's not even the parcel fabric, to go and show you things that are anomalies about your parcel, about your data. And it's a way of just looking and evaluating it because of the attribution that you've got stored inside of there. You can do this in ArcGIS Pro on any feature data set. You just need to identify the business rules, what's good, what's bad, and look at them and evaluate them that way. Okay. Let's identify. These are really just display layers. It's available for any parcel type, and you go and it doesn't correct anything. It just goes and displays it. Here's the gaps and overlaps in here. So what happens then? What happens if you want to go and fix these? here's the tools that allow you to go and fix these. There's 5 primary tools you use inside the parcel fabric. 1, align parcels, so that if you have a gap or overlap, you can go and select that parcel and then go and identify and say, okay, let's fix this so that there's no gaps or overlaps. The second one is this merge points. Let's go and show you merge points. Let's go back here and get back here to, here we go. I have here a situation in which this curve in all likelihood was supposed to go all the way to this point, but because of topology issues, because of whatever issues, it didn't do this. It's not supposed to be there. So that there's a line segment there and a point between these vertices that you want to go and fix. Let me turn this off. I'm going to turn this off here. All right. So how do we fix this? Inside the parcel fabric, and again, parcel fabric only tool, here's one that says merge points on here. What the merge points allows us to do is it allows us to select multiple points, allows us to go and select multiple points, and then it shows us on the preview what will happen if we take those points and merge them together. If we merge these to point number 1 instead of point number 2, it will go and move the line and move the polygon. Remember, inside of here, it's moving everything that's connected to it. It will move them all together to reflect what that blue line is there. If I want to go and tell it to that, it's going to go and move point number 1 to point number 2, eliminate, removing that line segment there. That's what this option is here. Between the merge points, it will move that and reset that curve to go all the way to this point here. So this allows me to go and take my data and kind of redefine how it's supposed to be together. I'm going to go back here and say, let's go to number 1 instead. And it will then go and merge them together and reset them exactly like that. Somebody ought to have a question about that. What happens there with all that stuff? What happens? It's moving the point. It is deleting any line that might be there, and it is redefining that boundary. Do you want to do this on data that you don't know what's happening? For example, on this one here, maybe there's supposed to be, let's go and measure this here. Let's go and measure this here. There's 2 feet. Maybe there is supposed to be a 2-foot difference in there. But if I don't know what I'm doing, I actually could go and say, well, let's merge these together. And so maybe this curve, I can bring it down to here, or maybe I could take that curve and set it up to that point there. It allows us to go and make small little redefinitions of where these things fit together. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go for that. I'm going to find someplace else around here where maybe there's a problem here. That's that one that's got that. Yeah, let's show a really bad one here. Let's say that I decided that that point is supposed to go here. All right, it was mapped incorrectly initially. This will allow me to go and redefine where these 2 points are supposed to go together and modify everything that's connected to those 2 points so that that's how it actually happens. it deletes and eliminates that line or any polygon that's in the middle of those two when I'm in here. This is very powerful tools for correcting these things. It is really for quality assurance. How do you go and fix this data if you know there's problems with it? But you can see, if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, you can corrupt it as much as you can fix it on there. But that's the merge points. The last time we had the discussion about the aligned parcels, and I showed you how it's actually a combination of the transform tool, where you're moving polygons and you're moving things so that they connect up to the same place, and the aligned features tool. And this is just breaking it apart, saying, let's analyze this and see how this all works. So you can use the transform tool by itself, or you can use the align features tool by itself, or you can use the align edge tool. I don't think we've actually used the align edge tool anywhere here. Where was that? Now let's see here. So let's go in here and let's suppose that these two are supposed to be together. The align, we could do merge points, which is going to move those two together, and then merge points and you do those two together. That's one way of doing it. These are all alignment tools, by the way. We could use a transform to pull this together if I wanted to. Align edge is one that's interesting. This was in ORMAP. Not quite as easy because you had to have things set up an exact way to go and do this. But the align edge tool allows you to go, and when I go and click on align edge tool, it's going to use map topology, and it's going to analyze, as I move my cursor over this, it's going to analyze the edges and the nodes, and it's going to reflect in a solid line, a line, the edge that's going to be impacted, and a dashed line where it's going to go. So as I move this over and I move over this line, it's going to go and show me, in this case, let's zoom in a little bit further closer. It's going to go and say, I'm going to take this solid line and move it so that it's coincident with this one. And you can see how quickly it can change. So I'm going to go and take that line and move it over. All right. And here's one of the things that it would say, no, wait a minute, you're going to go and remove a polygon. So it will give me a warning and saying, no, you can't do that unless you're sure that's going to go and handle it here. Let's go and see if we can find some other areas that might be a little bit easier without it removing a polygon. Here's one. Well, this will do the same thing. So I can say, well, take that line and move it over to there and do it there. And it'll give, again, you've got a polygon in here. If this was a gap, though, I could go in, well, let's get off of there. Let's go back here. Let's go and create a gap. Okay, I have a gap here. Let's go back to aligned edge. This will show me where I've got, here's my edges. Here's the nodes. In this case, I'm going to tell it, take that solid line and move it to the dashed line, and it will go and remove the gap that existed between there. It can be used to fix gaps or overlaps. This is super powerful, but you have to be really careful with it because sometimes you will collapse geometries that you don't want to be collapsed. But this uses map topology and is evaluating the nodes and the edges that you have drawn in here, and it will allow you to go and fix topology edges. But please make sure that you understand what that tool is doing. All right, I'm going to get off there. That tool is again very powerful, but I personally have gone and I've messed up data without it by using it and not being aware of what was going to happen. The Align Features tool, I've shown it a couple times. That's one of my favorite tools inside of Pro, and one of the reasons why Panda started using it. Align Features. Let me go in again, show you one of the interesting things here. Like I said, that's an approximation of a curve. That's a densified curve that exists on there. And we can use the Align Features tool with a much smaller setting and tell it to go and allow us to go and fix that curve by going and saying we want to go from this point to this point on that curve, and tell it to go ahead and fix those curves in there so that they're not densified anymore. They are in fact reflective of the true curves, and they are now true curves on there. So that's one of the general quality control elements that you've got in here. On here and here, and fix that densified curve on there. That's the Align Features tool, one of our favorite tools in here. So I've got something here. And as with others, I could type in R if I know what that radius is supposed to be to go and fix that. All right. Control points inside of a parcel fabric. If you have control points, just know that there's actually a couple of attributes that control it. Is fixed is the first one it checks for, and then there's some others in here. If you're not dealing with control points, we won't look at this much, but it's a way to go and evaluate whether or not a point gets moved or not. I think we had this discussion the first day. Let's skip there. Some settings. Let's go and spend a little bit of time talking about settings inside of Pro. This will make it easier or harder for you as you go and use Pro. Before I do this, and do we have any questions yet? As I told you in the beginning, if you don't stop me, I just keep talking. So any comments or any questions? Have you seen anything that might be useful to you? All right, here we
All of
go.
this is useful, but you're pretty comprehensive.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. To a fault, I know. I tell you things that it might take you a while to go and figure out where we're at. So settings. Here's one that drove me crazy initially. ArcGIS Pro by default wants to have a base map. It inherently wants a base map in there. You can actually tell it inside the backstage, which is what project options, this is called the backstage. Inside of here, you can tell it, for example, on the map and scene, that whether or not you have a base map. And this is, by the way, this is 3.2. And I can tell it whether or not I want a base map to automatically load every time I open up ArcGIS Pro. I never want one to load. I always want to see my data first. So I rarely have a base map in here, but if you do want to have a default one, you can set it up for any of them that's in your organization or anything that's on there. There's your default for your organization, for none, or any of the other base maps on there. You can have that automatically be displaying. But I could, how many times I connect up to a client and they have a base map shop popping up. And I'm like, do you really want that? And they're like, no, we just can't figure out how to go and turn it off. That's it. Base maps. Setting the default units on here, and I think we talked about this on the backstage under the options units. You have, here's the default units in here. And by default, you get these up to meters. I have actually added the chains, and you can add other values in here by pulling this pull down. So you can put yards and links and perches and all these other, the rods, all these others. You actually can add a vara if you're in Texas, which is interesting. A vara is sort of about 33 feet. So there's all sorts of different variations in here. All these are setups or equivalencies to a meter. As I said, a meter is the way everything is stored. It's stored in metric. We can remove chains if we're no longer going to use them. We can actually remove any of these others. So for example, if we're not using kilometers, why are we carrying them around? So we can go and add and remove things as we want in there. Angular measurements the same way. If we never use radians, we can go remove those. We can go and add values here as far as what type of an angular unit we're going to be using. Area units the same way. We have complete control over that. If we're never going to do anything in hectares, we can remove that from our project setting on here. You're not removing it from the overall default, but the project setting as far as what's getting opened up. Adding units. Here. Start and stop editing. This is one that everybody. So inside of here, under editing, there is a session grouping. Under the session grouping here, the first option here is enable and disable editing from the edit tab. By default, let me go back here. I gotta get out of here. Let me go back here and let us stop editing and let's discard all of our edits. Let's go back here to our options under editing, under our sessions here. By default, if you do not have anything set, ArcGIS Pro automatically, as soon as you start it up, is editing. No ifs, ands, or buts. You are editing any data that is set to be editable. That's the way as we set up the defaults. Now, it's true on the table of contents, you have this edit, you have list by edit. All right, and this tells you what you can edit and such. So you have some control there, but by default, it automatically is editing for you. That rarely is what most people want. So under the options, under there and under session, you have the ability to turn on and say, enable and disable editing from the edit tab. So now when I go back here to my edit tab, I have a new button called start editing, stop editing. Now under 3.2, there's another option here. Because inside of ArcGIS Pro, you can collect data from multiple sources. You have the option here that if you have this enable and disable editing turned on, you can tell it whether to automatically start editing all of the sources that are in your project or just a single workspace at a time. So this is again, a nuance of starting editing and stop editing. Previously in an ArcMap, you had to go to each of those sources and say start or stop those. Inside of Pro, you can either do single, which is start and stop each of them, or everything that's in your project, you can start or stop editing. Just be aware of that and what version you're working on. So that's starting and stopping editing. I recommend you turn that on. All right, just be aware of what it's actually doing. Saving edits. All right. This one I liken to a child wishing for something at Christmas. Because in ArcMap, I can tell you, I was one of those people that for a long time was saying, why don't you put automatically save edits inside of ArcMap? And they've done it in Pro. But when we started looking at it, we were like, well, wait a minute. If we say automatically save edits, it can save it either by a time interval for minutes, or it can save it by the number of operations, so that will automatically save that after we've done a certain time or stuff. If you're a heavy editor, if you edit a lot, you realize maybe saving edits is not something you want to do, because once you save an edit, you cannot undo it at all. So automatically having saving edit is not a great thing to do unless you also say, make sure that you confirm to save edits. So if you're going to do this, make sure you also do that. Make sure you have it pop up and say, I'm going to save edits. Do you want me to save edits or not? Make sure you do that, because otherwise it will save edits, not even notify you, and you can't undo it past then. Be aware of that. All right, that's there. Inside of Pro, there's also an option that not only do you have the ability to automatically save your edits, but under your General tab, there is an option called Project Recovery. This will save your project file. And what it actually does is it saves a backup copy that's hidden from you inside a .backup folder, and it creates a backup, and you set the time interval for that. And so that if you've been working and suddenly you get out of Pro without editing, or it crashes, the next time you open it up, the first thing it does is it checks that backup file, that backup folder, and says if it's newer than the one that's saved, it will prompt you and say, you've got a newer backup file. Do you want to go and restore that instead of opening the old saved version of it? This is a good option. I highly recommend you do this, that it saves it, so that all the changes as far as how your layers and feature classes are set up, the labeling setups, all of that is saved for you. However, there's this combination, since we have these two, that can be dangerous. So if I tell it to automatically create a backup file, and then I also tell it here to automatically save my edits when I'm saving my project file, that means that, again, every 5 minutes, it's going to automatically save my edits on here. So just be aware that mixing these two settings can complicate what's going on here for you. All right, just be aware of that. Yeah, no. You've seen me use here the data design a couple times. In the data design, this allows you to go and I think I talked about it, Elizabeth, turn on the attribute fields and whether or not they're visible. You can set field aliases. You can set whether or not they're highlighted, and you can configure these attributes and especially these numeric fields, what it's displaying back for you. This is a great improvement over ORMAP. To the point where, let's go in here to lines. I can go to my data fields and show you, I can go and configure, for example, my distance field, how many decimal places, whether or not there's 1,000 separators padded with zeros, and what my suffix might be if I want to go and set a suffix on here, so that when I open up this attribute table, it's highlighted so that I can actually, I pay attention to those fields that are highlighted on here. And you can see this is now quadrant bearing. This is a distance field with 2 decimal places on it with 1,000 separators, and it's got a suffix in here of feet. If I go back here with some of these other fields, for example, the creation date, I can actually go in here and modify the creation date here. And here it is, the creation date, and say that this is actually the date field. I don't want it to show me what the actual time is that it was, but I just want to go and reflect, oh, there's the date there in the way I want to go and look at it. And when I click save on here, this will then go and modify and change to the creation date. So I can set, again, similar to Excel, I can set how this thing is displayed for me on here. Yeah, this is a really nice tool on here. This also just sort of to reflect, this allows you to work on a data source, which you don't have the highlighting and everything else. This is just when you want to add an attribute field or delete an attribute field, or the way it looks in your current table of contents. Scott, you had a question.
Just a comment. I've noticed that there are different saves for different things. So like saving your edits, there's a save for that. And there's a different save if you're saving your data design. And if you're saving your project, there's different buttons to push depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, there's, again, that on my quick access toolbar, I have my save my project, I have my save my edits. But that's similar to ORMAP. ORMAP had the same thing, in that it had save edits and it had save map document. It's the same concept on here. As it relates to the changes in the configuration, yes, you are correct. There is, if I want to go in and say, well, this is this modified date here. Let's make a change in this modified date to the same sort of thing, change it to that. When I do this, there is a save this configuration, but this is on the actual fields tab, which allows me to go and do this. If I have an edit, it will not let me save unless I either discard that edit or save the edit. Then I can save this reconfiguration of my data. You are right, Scott. There is different saves in there. You just want to be aware of it, whether or not it will allow you to go and save them without confirming what you want to do or not. Yeah.
Can I add one thing, Frank?
You can add many things.
No,
sir.
just one, I hope. But Scott, just remember that any changes that happen to the attribute rules And to the databases, if you're going to be using enterprise, aren't something you're going to be able to do unless you actually are the administrator. And I apologize. I've been on another shot. I didn't know if you had brought that up, Frank.
Well, we actually haven't gone over attribute rules yet. We haven't looked at them yet, and that's probably what I'm going to do tomorrow. Let's look at those. Up until this point, it's been pretty, I'll look at that, arcade and such. I think we're going to stop here. And tomorrow we'll introduce arcade, go a little bit more into that, and maybe start looking at attribute rules and maybe give a couple of those out. And then I'll let Dean go and talk about all the tools that are in here and all the processing. So, any last comments for today? Any questions? Anything you want me to talk about tomorrow? Let's go ahead and let me know. Let me do all the talking. All right. All right. Well, I will then I'm going to stop the recording